We're out here feeding our chickens. We're gonna be making some chicken stock today, but first we wanted to go over a little bit about our chickens. Eric and I started with 30 chicks, 30 Icelandic chicks about 2 years ago, and they were straight run, so over half of them turned out to be roosters. In that first year, we did make chicken stock out of our roosters. Last year, we were really fortunate. We hatched out 35 little chicks, and they were actually ones that were hatched out by these girls here themselves, so the mom. One of the reasons we went with Icelandics is because they are known to go broody, so they make excellent moms and they'll hatch out their own chicks, which is awesome for us because we can turn over our chickens when we need to. As you know, when chickens get a little bit older, they don't lay as well anymore. And we also really like chicken broth, so we make our own chicken broth pretty much every year. This morning, since our temperatures are warming up, they're getting some soaked feed. They really like the seed when it's soaked like this. Obviously, we can't do that all winter. Right now, we have just under 35 chickens, and that is including 3 roosters. We also have 4 Jersey Giants, the big black chickens, and then we have 1 cross. She's an Icelandic and a Jersey Giant. We feel like that's a good number for us, so we are not going to be having them hatch out any chickens. You know, they're gonna go broody and we'll have to break them, so to speak. That just means we set them in a cage, so we break that broody tendency, but we're not gonna be hatching out chickens because this seems like a really solid amount. We're getting about, you know, a dozen eggs a day, and I expect that to kind of ramp up as we get into longer daylight hours. You can probably tell that these chickens are a little bit smaller. They're not really an ideal meat bird, but you can definitely use them for that. They do have meat on them, and they actually have really excellent flavor. So the older hens make really good, you know, stews and chicken stock. Same with the roosters, they're great for that. And generally, when you hatch these guys out, you're gonna have a 50% ratio of roosters. So you kind of gotta find a plan of what you wanna do, whether that be eat them or rehome them. We're making stock today, so we're out here actually to collect one of our roosters. We have 3 right now, and it's just not working out with the one fella that we have put aside this morning. Okay, was that okay? This is one of the roosters that we hatched out last spring, and we have made the tough decision to not keep him. We actually don't need 3 roosters for how many girls we have. We're fine with just 2. They all get along really well, and our main reason for deciding to cull him today is that we do not need 3, but also he is a singer. He is a major singer, so he crows in the middle of the night, pretty much all night. And I don't think anyone appreciates that, so we're deciding to cull him for those reasons. Our other 2 roosters do not do that. They only crow mainly like early morning hours, pretty much until they go to bed. That's sometimes a trait that is passed along, so I don't want him to breed with any of the girls and hatch out another rooster that may also like to sing all night long. This rooster is not even a year old. He was hatched out in April, so he's actually a really good size. I'm excited to make stock with him. He's a much bigger, he has like a stockier body for an Icelandic. They can get quite a bit bigger and you will get more meat from them, but like I mentioned, you can run into some problems when you have, you know, a higher rooster ratio to hens. This bubble's over, honey. I know. So when keeping chickens, like these ones, there's a lot of things for Eric and I to consider. I've went over their comb size, coloring, attitude. That's one of the reasons we kept him. He's actually a really nice rooster. He's really good with the hens. He's very good with the other roosters, but you can kind of tell he's really kind of like wiry, and he hasn't changed much. He's very scared of us. Most of our other chickens are not scared of us now that we've had them for a few years. So I don't necessarily care for that trait. He's obviously scared for a pretty good reason today, but he doesn't know why that reason is. He's a really beautiful rooster, really nice coloring. And like I said, I do really like that. I like his comb. It's pretty good for not getting frostbite. He has gotten a little bit, but it's not bad. It's definitely not one of the easier things about keeping chickens, but they do get older and they do, like I said, stop laying. You don't need 100 roosters. At least I don't need 100 roosters. And this is kind of the just real life aspect of it. Eric and I have raised chickens for a long time and we're pretty used to it. It's not fun to have a day where you cull chickens, but the product that you get at the end is so incredible. It's such a rich, awesome chicken stock. Eric's got a station set up where we're going to dispatch our friendly little chicken. So we're going to head over there.
There's a term that goes, run around like a chicken with your head cut off, and that term is definitely true. Back in Oregon, our first time ever having to kill one of our chickens, I guess we didn't really expect a chicken to run around with its head cut off, and it did, and it was a fiasco. Since then, we've changed how we've done it. We raised a lot of chickens back in Oregon, hundreds of them. We actually used to sell packaged meat birds. We would kill those using kill cones. We had stations set up, but since we don't kill very many chickens, we just use a block of wood. We hold down the chicken. It's a lot easier with 2 people. You cut the head off. You basically hold them real tight, because as soon as that head comes off, they basically start freaking out, and it takes about a minute for them to die.
As with any kind of killing process, there's just a lot of things going on still in the body. So it can be kind of alarming if you're not used to it. It's not really easy to deal with, but we've done it a lot. It's customary for us to say goodbye to our chickens prior to culling them, and we appreciate all that they have given us and are going to continue to give us. He didn't like that.
No. With that being said, we're gonna dispatch this chicken. We'll catch up with you guys when we're done.
We're in the kitchen. We have our rooster all cleaned up and processed. We're also going to be using a hen that we processed a little bit earlier this year. She's also going into the chicken stock for us today. For those of you that are interested, I was going to quickly go over how we use the entire animal. So first off, Eric and I skin chickens. We have plucked them in the past when we were selling meat birds. The skin has some awesome flavor, but just for ease, we skin them with the feathers, and I compost that. That goes all back into the garden, which gives back to us for our food. Virtually none of the organs or any part of the animal goes to waste, with the exception that I do compost the intestines. I don't give that to the dogs at all, but we give a lot of the other parts to the dogs. The feet, we're going to use those for chicken stock. They have a lot of flavor. The head is going to go to the dogs. Gizzard, liver, heart, all those sorts of things can go to the dogs. And as I'm sure you know, you can absolutely eat certain organs too if you want. Many folks do that. We just know how much our dogs enjoy also eating chicken, so we like to share with them. This rooster weighed almost 3 pounds. I'm a little bit surprised about that. That's on the bigger end. I think they can get up to 4 pounds, and the hens usually only weigh 1 to 2, so much smaller. Definitely not a meat bird like I mentioned. I don't know if you've noticed, but they are much darker. They've got a really rich meat, really dark legs, and that just gives you more flavor. It's what type of bird they are, and we're always sure to leave as much fat as they have on them. They have a lot of yellow fat, which again, fat is flavor in my world. If you want to make chicken stock and you don't have chickens like this because you didn't go out and cull one this morning, you can still make chicken stock. You just use a chicken from the store. All chickens really turn into good chicken stock, especially with all the other ingredients that we're going to be adding. We're going to put these in a pot and start our chicken stock. The more chickens you use, you can definitely add more water and you will get more chicken stock as a result. It's likely that you may only have 1 chicken, so that's totally fine for chicken stock. In fact, you can use a carcass. If you only have a carcass available, this is awesome for chicken stock. You do not need the whole chicken with the meat and all of that. If you go get a chicken, eat all the meat, just put the carcass, the bones still have a lot of flavor with a whole bunch of ingredients and water, and you'll have chicken stock. In go the feet, and we're going to top this with just enough water to cover the chicken carcasses. We're going to get that turned on. It is going to cook for quite a long time. And as far as ingredients, you really can put whatever you want in there for flavor. Onion, celery, carrots, that's all pretty common, garlic and herbs. We don't have all of that today, and we are just going to be using pretty much what we have available to us at this season. I would love to use an onion, but I ran short on them, so we're going to be using leeks instead. We're also going to be using garlic that we have stored in some olive oil, and we're going to be using a bunch of herbs. I've got rosemary, sage, thyme, coriander, oregano, and celery leaves since we don't have celery. Definitely wish I had some carrots for this, but I don't. I have canned carrots, which would not be good to put in this. I would definitely recommend some fresh carrots if you have any. This is going to cook for quite some time, probably 2 to 3 hours. We'll see what we're thinking. And we're going to keep it on a pretty low simmer, keep an eye on it. That's going to help us develop a really good flavor in there the longer we let it cook. We've also made chicken broth the expedited way in our pressure canner when we're culling roosters and we have a lot of them to do. That's a much quicker way to do it. You can, tighten it down, get up to pressure. And it's done in like 40 minutes or so. But we wanted to go back to trying it in a pot because we've done it a lot of times. We've made chicken broth a lot of times both ways, and I actually think you get a better flavor doing it this way. We're going to put a lid on our pot, bring it up to a boil, and then we're going to reduce it down to a simmer. Chicken broth is looking really good. It has been going for about 2.5 hours. And we're going to let it go a little bit longer. I want a lot of flavor. We're going to let it go at least another hour. And in the meantime, I'm going to get some of our canning jars ready because we are going to be canning the chicken stock. Our chicken broth is done. We're going to be pulling out the chickens. I'm going to set them aside and then we're going to strain everything. We let everything cook for 3.5 hours. So it is very, very cooked. You can tell it's just falling apart. That broth looks delicious. Because we're using the meat for dinner, I'm trying to get all of the meat out of here. And I think that's it. I completely forgot about the feet, but we're not going to be eating those. Just get all that liquid down in there. It's such a pretty golden color. There's some fat from the chicken and then some of the olive oil from the garlic. And this is our broth. Like I said, I think that turned out absolutely wonderful. You can add salt and pepper at this point if you want. I'm just going to wait until we actually go to cook something with it to add that. What's left in the strainer is going to be going in the compost. And the chicken, of course, is not. We're going to make dinner with that. And depending upon the bones, if we cooked them long enough and they crumble, you'll kind of be able to tell they'll disintegrate when they're a little bit cooler. Then I can give them to our dogs if they're that soft. If they're not soft enough, I do not give them to our dogs, and I'll probably just end up composting those. So I can't quite tell. These ones feel like they may be a little bit hard, so I'll have to tell a little bit later. But the meat's going to be awesome, and there's a lot of it, so we are going to make some awesome dinner with that. At this point, you have a bunch of different options with the broth. Maybe you made it with just one carcass and it's just enough to make soup or rice or something like that, so you don't really have leftovers. If you do have leftovers, the probably easiest thing to do would be to freeze it. We don't tend to do that here. We like to can it. That makes the most sense for us in the long term. So we are going to be canning it today, and we're going to be walking you through that entire process if that's something you're interested in. We're going to get things cleaned up, and then we're going to get this into our jars. We've got our jars cleaned and ready to go. If you've never canned chicken stock or chicken broth, it's actually very simple to do. We're going to kind of walk through it today. We've got our Presto 23 quart canner out. I'll link that information in the description if you're interested. We've had that canner for years, probably over 6 years, and canned many, if not thousands of jars in it. So I highly recommend it. It's definitely a really awesome canner. Some other things you might want to have is a funnel and canning tongs. These are really useful because the jars get very hot. I'm also going to be using measuring cups today to fill the jars. That's just my preferred method because it goes very quickly that way. With all that said, we are going to get started. I'm going to put aside about a cup of chicken stock for dinner tonight. We're just going to fill them up. It's pretty straightforward. I like to dip this measuring cup in there to kind of mix up the fat with the broth. And we have to pressure can this, so it does have to go into a pressure canner. It's not really eligible to water bath. And I'm making sure to leave an inch headspace, and that is from the top of the jar. And there's these little indication marks, so there's a bottom rim, and that is about an inch. And the reason you want to leave that space is because we're creating the pressure canner is creating a seal, a vacuum seal, and it's going to suck some of that air out. So you need to have a little bit of air gap. It can't just be liquid all the way up to the brim. So it's helpful to measure out the water when you cover up your chicken so you kind of have an idea of how many jars you're going to be processing. We're hoping for 7, and that's how many our pressure canner actually fits. We were a little short on the last one, so I added a little bit back from our dinner that we reserved, and I also topped it off with just a tad bit of water. You can totally do that. The only thing you want to remember is that these should be fairly hot, if not boiling, when you put them in your jar. So keep it hot. If you took some time and let this cool down, you'd want to get it back up to a high heat before you actually start this canning process. And this is a crucial step to me, and I'm sure many people who can, at least I like to do this, is wipe the jars, or the rims. I'm wiping the rims with vinegar, and I'll even run back along with a cloth and dry it. That helps make a really nice seal and get rid of that oil and the fat that we have, or if you're canning something that's sticky. So I got a little sidetracked and I put the lids aside. These are brand new lids. I usually like to heat them up just a tad bit. It softens that rubber and then it helps me get like a perfect seal. I have had ones that don't always seal. It doesn't happen a lot, but I have found that heating these up makes a big difference. They say you don't have to, but again, just from my experience, I have found just getting them a little bit warm helps me. While we're multitasking, we are going to add 3 quarts of water to our pressure canner. I'm just going to slide each of these on there, and you can tell they're already kind of sticking because they're hot. And it's helpful at this point to have tongs to get the lids out. And we're just going to slide them onto each of the jars. We're putting our bands on now, and I am doing them about fingertip tight. And it's helpful to have a mitt for this because the jars themselves are very hot. There we go. These are all ready for the pressure canner, but I have to check the water first to make sure that we're kind of at a similar temperature to the chicken broth. The water in the pressure canner is the perfect temperature. I didn't measure it, but I used my finger and it's hot. And the reason you want it hot is because you can have some thermal shock to the jars if you put the hot jars in cold water. And we have had that happen. We have had quarts actually break. Quarts are the one that we found in our years of experience are the first to go. And what I mean by that is they're always fine the first time that you're canning, but as your jars age, they get older, you move them around, maybe sometimes they go through frosts and things like that. And we found that the quarts are the ones that are most susceptible to breaking. So, and they're most susceptible to that shock that I'm talking about. The half pints and the pints, rarely do we have those break. And it really sucks when you are pressure canning something and you hear that sound and you know that you lost all of your beautiful food that you have worked so hard for. So don't make that mistake and just try to check temperatures, make sure that they're close enough to each other. We're now ready to put the lid on. Everything's looking good with our lid. We've checked our seal, and we've also checked to make sure that there's nothing blocking the air vent. The arrows line up, and then I twist it, and you can feel it kind of lines up. I've got my heat on high. What we first need to do is let the pressure canner vent for 10 minutes out of the air vent. What will first happen is this airlock will pop up. You'll hear sound coming out and see steam coming out, which is indication that it's venting. We're gonna let that go for 10 minutes. I realized I was calling these by the wrong name. This is the air vent, and this just popped up. And our vent pipe, you can tell there's some steam coming out of it. So we are going to put 10 minutes on the clock. It's been 10 minutes. I'm going to add our pressure regulator on the vent pipe. And at this point, we're going to let the dial gauge get to 11 pounds. That's what we have to process the chicken stock at. And once it reaches 11 pounds, I'm going to adjust the temperature to stay at 11 pounds, and we will start the time for processing the chicken stock, which for quarts is going to be 25 minutes. It's been 25 minutes. I'm going to shut off the heat, and we're going to let the pressure drop, and we're going to let our pressure canner naturally cool down. We have to wait at least 10 minutes before we can open up the lid, and that is after the pressure has reached 0. That's it. Our chicken broth is done and it's gorgeous. And I would absolutely recommend, if you ever get your hands on some chickens, to make this because it's so good. It's so versatile, from soups to making rice, beans, I mean anything really, you name it. You could even cook pasta in it if you wanted to. We're ready to make dinner and we are in the mood for Mexican food. So we are making shredded chicken with tostadas and some red rice.